All right, welcome back. This is the Something Venture podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today, again, Carter Cohen. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, hi. It's great to be back.
So you might remember Carter was on before. Carter does a lot of things, but among them, he is a Gen Z person who has interesting perspective of being a Gen Z person. And when you were on last time, that became my most popular podcast ever. So that was kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. I don't know what I did right, or maybe you did something right.
I don't know. Maybe we both figured something out. The podcast actually got featured in Fortune magazine after that. I don't know because of that, but that's like one of the things that happened that was cool in 2018. But I thought it'd be fun just to have another conversation. You've been to college for a while now. You're a sophomore at Georgetown. Is that right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And just kind of talk about your perspective on a whole bunch of things. I'm super curious what you think about a bunch of stuff. I actually looked this up. So Generation Z, here's where this fits in, as I understand. There's the boomer generation. There's people born after the war. That's like a pretty easy one. After World War II, pretty easy one to understand. Everyone comes back from the war as kids. Then there's Generation X. Then there's millennials. Then there's Generation Z. And there's one behind that they now call Generation Alpha. So
I'm not aware of this one.
I just looked this up on Wikipedia, so it may or may not be true. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is, if you look at that sequence, Boomer, X, Millennials, like they're just like kind of drifting back and forth between. It's not like A, B, C, D, E. It's like animal, vegetable, number.
Yeah, I'm not sure where they're getting the inspiration for, like, they go with Gen, insert letter here, but then go to something like millennials.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I get the millennials because it's like around the turn, but
And I can't keep track too. The other thing that everyone does that I'm not going to do because I can't even keep it straight is like, well, there are people who've been alive where like there never was not an internet, or September 11th had always been in the past. I can't keep it straight. You're in college. It's 2019. Let's chat. So how is college going? How do you like Georgetown?
Well, it's going fantastic. I think I'm lucky enough to have found like the school I wanted to go to on the first take. A lot of people aren't super happy their first year, don't find their friend group or whatever it is, but I was lucky enough to do that. So,
and you came from like one of these very cool schools in San Francisco. What has it been like in college, sort of integrating and meeting people from other walks of life? Or have you? Or is it just a whole bunch of people just like you?
Well, that's pretty exciting because, well, two things. The first is that I went to like a French international school, it's like bilingual. So everything I learned in high school was in French. I learned physics in French. I learned math in French.
Wow.
I learned biology in French.
And are the rules of physics the same in French?
Well, yeah, they are indeed.
I'm kidding.
But the terminology isn't always the same.
Right, of course.
And your methods of covering different topics is not always the same.
Right.
For example, my senior year of French math, well, I mean, math is math, but we covered, we barely touched matrices, and then we covered a bit about vectors. And just the order of that is not at all what I did when I had to go to college and I was forced to take Calc 2 and multivariable calculus. It was taught in a completely different order. So I think the structure building up to that varies. And that actually, it was interesting because when I went to Georgetown and I'm a biochemistry major, we started off with so topics. And like I had known the intro level stuff. Yeah. But when I would write papers, I wouldn't write it in the way that an American scientist would prefer, or so on and so forth.
And when you get there, do you start to interact? So that's a pretty elite school still. I mean, in the scheme of the world, when you get there, did you start to interact with people who came from different backgrounds, international backgrounds at all? Like,
well, the running joke is that everyone at Georgetown is from Jersey.
Oh, great.
Well, that's, and if you meet someone, odds are they might be from Jersey, but everyone like across the 50 states is represented, and a bunch of countries. List goes on.
Yeah.
But I have had experience with a bunch of different students. One experience I had, someone who went to the Lycée Français de New York, so like basically like the counterpart to my school in New York, like a French international school. Yeah. I met him in the Grilling Society, which is I'm an avid member. Right. And so meeting him and a bunch of other people, there is definitely homogeneity. There we go. At Georgetown, but if you look hard enough, you find people from all backgrounds.
And how do you view, from your point of view, I think your generation has more coming of age online, you see more points of view from around the world than anybody, because when you're online, people from all over the world are just connected. How do you think about like the United States and like being from the United States? Like, is it the most extraordinary thing, or is it like not that cool, or is it just another country and they're all good and bad?
Well, I think the privilege to go to the school I go to is something you have to acknowledge, because I mean, to grow up in the United States, it's something special, but it's not as if a lot of people say like, oh, America's the best, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I'm an avid believer, because I've had the privilege to travel a bit, that America is indeed not the best country in the world.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the opportunity, and the school system is not something to be taken for granted,
Right.
I mean, having clean water and so on and so forth, that's something you have to acknowledge. But in terms of, like first world countries and, well, I don't know if you're allowed to say that, like more developed countries.
I can't keep up.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's a thing. That's a thing now. We're not supposed to say. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're not supposed to say third world countries. You're supposed to say lesser developed.
Okay.
Or
That's fair.
I mean, it's fair.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, in terms of Japan, France, Canada, all first world countries, so on and so forth. I don't think America is anything
Right.
extraordinary or above and beyond. But
Well, I mean, I'll get right to. So, what do you think when you and your friends think about the future, like 5, 10? Because there's a lot of thought that the world is actually getting better by a lot of different metrics.
Mm-hmm.
However, you could post online. Somebody just was giving me this example where Bill Gates gave $18 million to some
Mm-hmm.
cause, and the comments were all like, why only $18 million? Like, there's such a negative spin on everything.
yeah.
How do you guys look at the future? Like, what do you think 5, 10 years out? You're like, oh, this thing's all screwed, or oh, this is going to be good. Like, once these guys get out of the way, or
Well, I think a big thing I've learned with the Grilling Society is that we live in the present.
And what is that?
My friend group.
What is that?
Oh yeah, sorry. Well, it's Jugs, and it's not what you think it is. It's the Georgetown University Grilling Society, but the first G is pronounced like Georgetown, so Jugs.
Yeah.
And so I spend a lot of my time with them, and every Friday we grill and serve burgers to customers, and it's just a good social group of friends that are just fantastic people. But I'd say that we live in the present, but if you were to ask me like 5, 10, 15 years into the future, what will the world look like? I mean, I guess everyone has grandiose expectations that hopefully, either it's flying cars or eradicating hunger or like zero waste. I mean, as realistic as it may seem, I just lost my train of thought.
You're pretty optimistic about the future.
No, I would say that it seems that way, but I'm not. I think that people can highlight the good and the bad, and wherever there's good, there will always be bad, and wherever there's bad, there will always be good. So like Bill Gates I was watching a video of The Daily Show, and I think it was a segment on how Bill Gates donated $200 million to redesign toilets. Mm-hmm. And so you'd be like, oh, what a waste of money. But, if you go into it, it's actually a really interesting investment, and how you can turn, your excrements into drinkable water. But, there's like good in that story, but there's also like, I took a race and racism class this semester, and, at the rate that, blacks are improving their standard wage, like compared to whites, it's going to take 550 years or something like that for like equal pay and equal treatment to finally be reached. And there's a difference between fair and equitable. So, I mean, I don't know. There's good and bad to both things. And when you say like, oh, in 15 years, the water crisis could be solved, in 550 years, racism could be solved. And many people don't believe racism is still a thing. So
yeah, that's it. I mean, part of this podcast has been me sort of saying, oh, is this XYZ really a big deal? Sexual harassment, racism. Mm-hmm. And the answer is inevitably like, yeah, and like way more than you think, especially racism. Like I don't think I or anyone thought it was like really solved or close to solved, but you felt like we were doing a lot better than maybe over the last 5 years we've realized like, oh, geez, we're not doing... and not to act like we all thought it was solved. Like, that's ridiculous. But I didn't think it was as bad as I've kind of come to see lately.
Definitely. I mean, I think there's the, obvious racism from, name so-and-so politician there.
Yeah.
I'm not taking any sides, but I'm just saying, there's obvious and evident racism in our society. If someone's saying something, you're like, wow, that targets this group. But then there's a lot of, implicit and covert racism in society that we just don't notice. And when we don't notice it and someone tries to expose it, there's like this, sin or like voodoo that if you're labeled a racist, you're a bad person, definitely. And I think for us to like improve upon that problem, you have to acknowledge it. And just because you've said something racist, for example, doesn't mean you are a racist and a bad person. It's that you need to acknowledge what you've done, and if people acknowledge, then they can improve. So,
yeah, I've heard. Well, I won't go too much into it. But I've heard some stories lately that are just like very high level people at very famous corporations saying things that are kind of shocking, like pretty overt, like things like, minority programs are good, but the like they're better at certain kinds of jobs, which of course is as racist as you can get, saying that your race has something to do with what job you might be good or not be good at. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it's like you'd like to think that, the Civil Rights Act and, the Voting Rights Act fixed everything in the 60s, but then like 15 years later it gets gutted, and now what state was it? I forget the news article, but like Alabama, apparently there's no federal overruling on like the voting system in Alabama now.
It's I find it so odd. And you go to some other countries, and I guess this is a problem everywhere in the world, and they kind of look at it and they just find it kind of a waste of time, because they're all like, other than they all have their tribes and everyone's fighting with somebody, I guess.
Well, yeah, you'd like to say like, because I went to a French school, I have a bit of French pride, but
right.
I could use France as an example that does better in terms of like racism. Not that they've solved it either. There's still virulent racism. I don't know if you remember the Spider-Man. It was the immigrant who,
the guy who climbed up the building and saved a kid or something.
Yeah, and so like a few days later, like the president offers him citizenship, but like before he did that act, no one cared who he was, and like they wanted him to leave. Yeah. But now that he did something good, like he had to prove himself.
Right. Which your average normal French citizen wouldn't have to.
Well, yeah, the normal French citizen won't be, or immigrant won't be looking at a building and see a kid dangling off the 5th floor because the parents are responsible. But
so I'm surprised you're that optimistic about the future. That's cool to hear.
Well, yeah, I'm optimistic. It'll always get better, but
right.
To say that it'll get great in 15 years is.
Are there any technologies? I want to ask you about specific technologies today, but technologies that you think are, blockchain, VR, or artificial intelligence that you think are, the future's really going to be helped by this or that technology, or you're like, or who the hell knows?
Well, I'm more in the hard sciences. So when people say like blockchain to me, well, first I think of it as sort of like a meme among like my generation.
Oh, that's
which
funny.
Like that's what I was also gonna say. Like when we were talking last time about generations, and we were asking what the cutoff was. Like some people say, "Oh, do you remember 9/11? If so, you're millennial. If not, you're Gen Z." I was also gonna say there's the way you see humor. I think my age group sees memes, which are like the little, like the little like text box and then a photo there.
Yeah.
I think the cutoff between what a generation would find funny and not funny is actually very different. So like, for example, when someone brings up blockchain to me, 90% of the time they're using it as a joke to make fun of like Silicon Valley or
interesting.
Yeah, I know. It's like, while you were partying, I studied the blockchain and mastered the art. Yeah, it's so blockchain, I don't know too much about. I can't talk too much on that. But
by the way, nobody does.
Yeah,
I think that's actually a pretty funny perspective on it, because the joke I make, not the joke, but the observation I have about the blockchain is that most technologies, they're there, but you just use them. So, for example, email, maybe it's based on packets or whatever, but there was email. It's like, do you like it or do you not like it? With the blockchain, aside from the cryptocurrency, there really isn't anything that you use, but you get these long explanations about why it's going to be great for but nobody sat around and said, email is going to be great. You're going to love it. It's going to do this. And so blockchain is funny as a technology that doesn't really have any living uses yet. Yeah,
definitely. When people say like cryptocurrency to me, I just go like fake money, but all money is fake technically. So, it could be something. And like, if that becomes a way for international trade to prosper, then it could definitely be a thing. I have worked at a company, a biotech startup in San Francisco called Prellis Biologics over the summer. And the company is sort of creating molds or like synthesizing biocompatible molds for kidneys and various organs and like experiments. And essentially you can seed the structure and then sort of create a synthetic organ out of that. So I've had a lot of experience over the summer learning more about like hard science inventions. So the company that I worked at, if they're successful in 3 to 4 years, which I think they'll definitely be, because it's great people, they'll be able to synthetically create an organ. For example, the donor list for the kidney donor list, there's too many people that need kidneys and not enough kidneys, right? With self-driven cars, which will come in like 10 to 20 years.
Yep.
Eventually the accident rate will go down, right?
Right.
So there'll be even less kidneys. So now you have a shortage of kidneys for patients that need them. Yeah. So you wouldn't really. So I'm just saying, like in this example, the company I worked at over the summer happens to be solving a problem that could very well be created in the near future by another invention of auto drive cars.
That's really interesting. That's an interesting perspective. That's one of the things I hear. There's a venture firm called DCVC, Data Collective Venture Capital, another one called Lux, and they've been doing a lot of work in really hard sciences stuff, quantum computing, like biotech. And I feel like biotech and medicine for a lot of years has been, I don't know, to me a disappointment. Like, okay, you haven't really fixed a lot of diseases, et cetera. But lately I've been hearing more and more about people are like, I don't know, we're pretty close on some actual real things that might solve actual real disease states. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when people talk about diseases and like curing past diseases, I mean, over time, like over the years, you said like society has overall improved. Like 100 years ago, the cancer survival rate was much, 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 much lower than it is today. Yeah. And while it's not perfect today and we want to get even higher, there's still been improvement. And so I don't think people notice until something sort of groundbreaking has been made. And the further you get into a science, the harder it is to make a groundbreaking discovery.
Yeah.
So, for example, like with influenza, every year it's different. So you can never, at least not in the near future, you'll never be able to cure influenza because every year you'll have like you'll have the vaccination, but like every year it changes, and sort of like no matter what, there'll always be a disease that is created out of, you know what I mean? So while you can minimize the damage with the advent of science, you can never sort of prevent it.
And why is influenza always at the level of, maybe you don't know this, it's always at the level that it's at. Like it seems that people get sick, a really small percentage of people die, but it's never like super lethal.
Yeah, it's because, well, I'd like to say again, it's like with the improvement of technology and science and medicine. So, what year was it? Was it the Spanish flu, the Great War flu?
Yeah.
The one that killed 300 million people?
Yeah, 1900s or something?
Yeah.
I went to a public high school, so I don't know.
I don't want to be, so I don't want to be quoted on those numbers, but, that killed hordes and hordes of people because, well, I mean, science, like, I'm pretty sure penicillin was discovered in 1918, 1914. So, I mean, they were just doing antibiotics 100 years ago, but now, like, the death rate is so much lower because, well, we have the vaccinations, which some people don't get. You should probably get your vaccinations. And, I mean, it's just with vaccinations and with advanced medical technology, I mean, you can obviously prevent.
So what about the silicon? So you mentioned that you guys grill every Friday, which seems like a very in real life experience. What is the online experience like at college these days?
Well, I think it varies depending on your social level and, what you're up to. I mean, if you're more into, if you're very big on, you're a comp sci major, you're big on web board chats or Reddit or whatever it is, then you'd spend more time on there. And if you're more into gaming, you might spend a Saturday night playing video games with your friends and talking them through there than actually like meeting up with them. The Grilling Society is much more analog. Is that the right word? Where we meet up in real life. So technology sort of in college, it's changed. Like I think when I was here 2 years ago, it was about 2 years ago, right? I was a big user of Snapchat and not a very big user of Facebook. And so while I don't think I'm a big user of Facebook still, I definitely use it much more differently than I did in high school.
And how do you use that? So you Snapchat kind of you stopped using.
Well, I still use it, but it's definitely like I've hit the point where I don't really care to maintain my streaks, as they're called.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like back in high school, I'd be like, oh my god, I forgot to do my streaks. I'd run like I could be doing an essay, I could be an exam, I'd be like, I got to check my streaks.
I forgot about that little bit of engineering where you,
And it's just like a little trick that they get to make you want to maintain and then show up. Be like, oh, my streak's 365 days, yours is 364.
Right.
I have now asserted dominance. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, I definitely use Snapchat just to send like texts and stuff, but I definitely use it a lot less
interesting
than I did.
Yeah,
I don't
seems
really
to be
care
pretty
about,
true across
maybe
the
it's
board.
I grew up or I don't know.
Yeah. And then Facebook, you said you use more now, or a little bit more.
Well, differently. So, I mean, in high school, I used Facebook barely ever. But now that I don't see a lot of the people I knew from high school and a lot of the professors that they add you on Facebook just to stay friends and to keep up. So, you know, just to, when the New Year's comes around, you just see what they're up to. Like my geography teacher who I had for 3 years in high school, he's now in Amsterdam. And so, like, you just get an update saying, like, how he's doing in Amsterdam. Right. Or how my history teacher is still doing great in San Francisco.
Right.
And also for events.
Yeah.
Because Facebook actually is a very good way to plan an event and then invite people.
Yep.
So, you know, every 1 to 2 weeks, it's like, depends on the size of your friend group, obviously, not trying to toot my horn, but like, I'm just saying, like, if someone's having their birthday party or someone's having at Georgetown, if you're turning 21, it's called the Tombs Night because there's a very famous bar a block from campus called the Tombs, which sort of you turn 21 and you go to the bar and you get stamped on your forehead with like the Tombs logo, and that sort of indicates that you've turned 21 that night, and so everyone's supposed to buy free drinks for the person who has turned 21. Must be nice. I'll see you in a year and a half.
Exactly.
But so I mean, event planning and inviting people. I don't use Messenger nearly as much as I use just like iMessage on the iPhone.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, not that it makes a difference, but it's just easier to send the blue text than the green text.
Something had emerged last time that you clued us into, you were just about done with, and I think, was it House Party or something?
Oh, yeah.
That you'd been using, but you were like, it's probably not going to be around much longer.
I haven't heard of it since I started college.
And I think you're right.
I don't know if anyone still uses it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, rest in peace. It was very niche. I mean,
what about Instagram? Is that
Instagram,
factoring?
It's alive and well. People have been getting upset with it recently because they changed their algorithm on how you see posts.
Mm-hmm.
So
how'd they change it?
It used to be just like a chronology thing. Mm-hmm. So like, say you check Instagram once a day at 6 p.m. every day.
Yeah.
Well, after you've checked Instagram at 6 p.m. that day, and until you check it the next day, you had those 24 hours of people posting, right? And you'd ideally want to see the new posts. You don't want to see old posts you've gone through. And it used to be like chronological, but now they've rearranged it in a sort of popularity, amount of likes. I'm not sure what the algorithm is. I don't know if anyone's sure.
Yeah.
But it's just annoying because like I'll check something today and it'll be a photo of my friend, and then the next day I'll check something and it's the same photo of my friend, and then I have to scroll a good 5 minutes to see like 6 new pieces of content. And I'm like, this is annoying.
That's such a weird Silicon Valley. I mean, I get why they do it. Like it's somebody's job, and then they do some tests and they find out that they get more clicks because they put the popular thing up. But then as a practical matter, you're using it and you're like I'm checking in, you're showing me a 4-day-old post.
When I've seen it twice already.
And especially around, like, there's especially times when it's like, let's say there's a post that's really popular because it was the new year. Mm-hmm. Then on Thursday, January 4th, they cough it up to you like, Happy New Year. You're like, this is like out of context now because that was 2 days ago. Like, this is ridiculous.
Exactly. So I don't know if it's to maximize the amount of time people spend on the apps.
I'm sure it is,
I mean, there's more and more ads on there. Yeah. More and more oddly targeted ads, which are kind of uncomfortable. But I mean, the thing is, people won't stop using the app because what else are people going to use?
Well, what else are people going to use? Is there anything else that you see emerging at all? Or
you can post. The thing is, there's the eternal quote unquote aspect of Instagram as opposed to the temporary. So like Snapchat is all temporary.
Right.
It's 24 hours if you put it on your story.
Yeah.
Or less if it's just an individual snap, which is up to 10 seconds.
Right.
Instagram, it's like Instagram is sort of like I mean, I guess I'd call it like a profile. I mean, it is a profile.
Yeah.
But like where you just like, if someone wants to know who you are, what you look like, they will go to your profile, and that's like your eternal pictures of that people will see you as. And that's why people have the obsession of making themselves look perfect on Instagram, I think.
And what do you think of, I was talking to somebody about that, like that LinkedIn is kind of your resume. Your bio, like, you know, if you're going to a job interview, but so many people now, their job is actually they're an actor or they're a social media person. So Instagram might be their bio. Like, what do you think is your bio for an employer? Is it like Facebook? Is it Instagram? Is it LinkedIn? Is it?
For an employer, it definitely has to be LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I mean, I have fun with my LinkedIn a little bit. I mean, everyone watching this, you're probably not going to go to, or listening to this, you're probably not going to go to my LinkedIn. But
maybe
you can if you want.
Carter Cohen on LinkedIn.
It's like a professional like photo, or not a professional photo. It's just a photo of me in a suit, and then the background is like a generic Caribbean islands photo. And then I just thought it was less monotonous. But Instagram, my bio is a link to my Instagram.
Okay.
Just for giggles. But my LinkedIn bio is definitely like sophomore at Georgetown University, proud member of the Grilling Society, and I also did this, which actually makes me mildly qualified. But
interesting, yeah. I just wonder if more people use either, well, if you're in the, I call it the entertainment business, but it's more than that. It's, you know, social media growth hacker or whatever. If your YouTube or your Instagram is kind of your calling card, because you're like, look what I did. Or, you know, the simple one is your growth hacker is like, well, okay, how many, and you must have thousands and thousands of followers and whatever on Instagram and YouTube.
Well, definitely. I think also it depends what you're saying, what industry you're in. For like, if you're in the entertainment or acting or modeling, whatever it is, obviously Instagram is going to be your go-to.
Yeah.
That's where everyone, because that's where you shine.
Right.
But in science, I think still, and especially in academia, it's very old-fashioned, it's like the old guard.
Yeah.
Which is not great. I mean, it's, you know, write so-and-so paper X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And to do this, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And, you know, that it's 2019. Why are we writing papers and publishing stuff like it's 1970?
And how should it work? Like, what would be the...
Well, I don't know. It's just sort of, to publish something, you have to send it to a publisher or a journal. The journal reviews it, sends edits for you to do, and then it's published in so-and-so journal.
Right.
And, you know, it works well. It's like there's a universal citation method in chemistry.
Right.
Once you go to biology, there's a different citation method because it's not the American Chemistry Society, ACS. So sort of whatever, you know, thing you go to, it varies. You know, then there's Chicago, MLA, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on and on.
Right.
And there's just really no uniform and central way to sort of publish. And, well, the reason journals exist is to sort of like eliminate BS and make sure there's only thoughtful content coming out that actually has scientific impact. But it's so old guard, the method, that while it should still be thorough, there definitely could be changes to make it more accessible.
Maybe the blockchain. Because also access to papers are very expensive if you're not at a university or whatever. Do you see a lot like that in a university where it's, I mean, universities are, you know, you go for 4 years, you study. Hopefully. You study, you know, literature and sciences, and you go to classes and you fill out. But I mean, do you have a sense that like it's kind of keeping up or way the hell outdated? University in general? Yeah. Ooh, this is an exciting topic. So I go to Georgetown, which is a Jesuit institution. I am in the college, which has core requirements, like the liberal arts core requirements. The core requirements are, including for a hard science major in chemistry, which is the same as a government major, technically, in the eyes, for the core requirements. I have to do 2 theology courses, 2 philosophy courses, 2 history courses, 2 science courses, but like I'm a science major, I'm going to do that. A HALC course, which is Humanities, Art, Literature, and Culture,
a diversity domestic, and a diversity global. And if I'm not missing, writing 15, which is like baseline writing.
Yeah.
And I think that might be it.
Wow.
So some of those classes are great to take because
Right.
the world needs to get woke or wakes up.
Yeah.
There we go.
That's good.
So, the HALC requirement is great because for my HALC requirement, I took race and racism, and now I see the institutions in our society much, much differently.
Interesting.
Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
think that the U.S. military and every other institution in America is racist to an extent when they are. Not to say that they're bad institutions, just to say that there's still progress to be done.
And do you think that's a whole class, or is that, I mean, obviously it is a whole class. Is it a whole class worth of learning, or is that something where it's like everybody should read XYZ book? Like somebody was just telling me there's a book called like The History of, I wish I'll figure out the name, but it's about the history of housing in America and how racist that is too.
Yeah. Well, I think that, it's good for everyone to dive into like problematic subjects that exist in today's society. So like women and gender studies or race and racism, whatever it may be, justice and peace studies. Everyone should take a class or two just to be like, I thought this, but now I realize there's so much more that I had no idea about, and which is what college is sort of about. And so I took a race and racism course. I read one of the readings was from a woman and gender studies professor that said, I'm a woman and gender studies professor, but I had no idea race and racism was a problem until I said, well, let's look at how women are disadvantaged, and then let's look at how African Americans are disadvantaged. So it's sort of like apples to oranges.
And this
but
is one
still,
of the I want to explore this more on the podcast this year, which is in Silicon, they have the LGBTQ. I think there's a few more that have been added on, and women, issues. And then race issues, huge issues, but completely different. And in fact, just in the LGBTQ, bisexuals in Silicon Valley, to the extent they've got a problem, it's a very different one from being a woman, which is very different from being African American, which is very different from being transgender. So it's interesting when they all kind of get lumped, into these like big, totemic things.
And I don't think it's like you can compare, you can't mold them into the same issues because they're different issues and have different underlying causes. But what you can do is be like, in society, there's an issue and you should read up on it and learn about it. And then you can apply that I had this perspective, but it may not be right at all.
Right.
Or it may not be, all encompassing, and sort of just, an acts of study for just the sort of.
Well, in that set of courses that you're studying, maybe the best set of courses for somebody starting their career. It may also be the result of a bunch of negotiation, among a bunch of professors who are like, well, this is like the guy who's in the philosophy department's not like, it's cool. They don't need to learn philosophy if they're not into it. He's like, we've got a whole department based on people taking this class.
My race and racism professor, Professor Patterson, he was the chair of the department this semester, or he is the chair of the department just in general. He is was one of the biggest advocates, I'm pretty sure, for the a race and racism / diversity domestic course being included in the core requirements.
Yep.
But a little bit just on the core requirements, it's I'm a science major and I think it's 20 courses in chemistry and 6 labs.
Right.
And that is a huge amount of credits for a major.
Right.
And I still have to do all these other requirements.
Right.
A government major in the same college, so has to do the same requirements, has 10 classes for the major as opposed to 20 and 6 labs.
Yeah.
And has their core requirements.
Interesting.
And so it's I am a biochemistry major and they are a government major, and we both do a lot of work. It's sort of
right.
We have the same baseline requirements, but one has to do a lot more in a specific field. And it's I think the fairness is very off.
Northwestern was like that. I majored in economics and I took liberal arts, every philosophy, English, everything. I probably took, 5 extra classes in economics. It was a very marginal difference between hey, I'm just writing liberal arts education on my resume and writing economics on my resume. And I don't know what the other side of that coin was. I don't remember what the engineering school required and all that. What do you think about given, you're taking courses on racism and all of that, the sort of accusation that colleges are all just super liberal and, that's the kind of stuff a liberal person would do and maybe not a...
Yeah. Well, I think going to Georgetown is exciting because DC is wildly liberal. Like it's like 90% liberal.
Yeah.
Also has no
Except for the government, but yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I mean,
Not
like
the DC government.
but the federal, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But like the citizens and like the people that live there, like it's a very blue,
Yes,
very blue.
for sure.
I guess it'd be district, not state. But at Georgetown, because like people come in from all over the country, and like the people coming in from all over the country want to do government. Like that's the biggest major. A bunch of people that go to Georgetown like intern on the Hill, work for a senator or congressman.
Right.
And so you get like both sides of the equation. Like you get a lot of, I think it's like a 60-40 split, Democratic, Republican. And like there are those people in there that are like, oh, I'm independent. Oh, I'm I think one of my good friends a few years back, he was libertarian, like when I was a freshman, and now he's like, libertarianism doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Not saying it doesn't make sense. I'm just saying
We get a lot of
had
that.
a big shift.
We get a lot of that in Silicon Valley. You're like, okay, he's going to build the roads.
Yeah, it's like socially liberal, fiscally conservative.
There's also there's a Silicon Valley thing, not to digress, but where you've become really rich. So what I think your brain wants to do is convince you that it's not because of luck, it's because of hard work. So you get a lot of people who are rich who are suspiciously libertarian because that fits their worldview.
Which actually goes back to race and racism. It's like we have this idea in America that like with like that anyone can build their own future and like the meritocracy, and that if you become successful, it's because of your hard work you put in. It's not at all because of that. It's because of other factors that have influenced you. Like the only reason I was able to go to the French American school and that I was able to go to Georgetown is because my parents were able to support me and give me like the resources to succeed. I did not in any way, like I'm sure I worked hard to get where I am, but I in no way did all the work that was needed because that would be impossible.
Bill Gates is pretty good about that, where he points out that, I built Microsoft here. I didn't build it in Nairobi. I didn't build it coming out of nowhere. I built it out of like, my parents were, his dad ran Gates and Gates law firm in Seattle, and he had access to one of the first computers that you had to be a rich kid at a rich school with a mom who was on the board to get, he does point out that he, was in the right place to do what he did.
It's like Trump's small loan of $1 million. There, I put quotes there, but like, without the $1 million, would he have gotten off the ground?
No,
you never
not.
know. Exactly.
And I think it was more than that too.
Oh yeah, exactly. So it's saying like there's always external factors influencing who you are and what you become, and which is why people I am like passionate about affirmative action, and like a lot of people are like, oh well, now it's unfair to white people going to institutions because if you're black, it's a free pass to get in. Yeah, that's pretty ignorant. And if you want to know why, you should probably just read about it, because I'm sure you don't want me to go into a 15-minute rant.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be good. But what do you think then about the future of work? I mean, there's that. I mean, there's kind of globalization now, or maybe people are competing with all of China and all of India, or maybe not. There's AI coming along. There's the really rapid change in jobs that you see from there weren't Uber drivers, now there are Uber drivers. Maybe now there won't be Uber drivers. Like, how do you look at the future of work?
Well, in the future, I'm taking an ethics of AI class this semester, so I'll have to come back and tell you what about it. But I definitely think with globalization and all that, it's not like I guess it'd be an arms race of just the economy. Right. And, it's everyone's building up their economic might until whatever comes up must come down. Everyone's talking right now about this huge depression that's going to come in the nearing months, which I hope it doesn't, because I don't think anyone likes to be struggling. But no. I definitely think in the upcoming years, I think there's too much risk for anyone to be ballsy and sort of like change the way the world works. For example, like, I don't know, when World War II came around, Germany was humiliated because of a very unfair Treaty of Versailles from the First World War. And there were also many other factors, they wanted more economic production, blah, blah, blah. And also the rise of, Hitler and all that. Right. So, and, there was no huge deterrent to keep like the world from going into massive chaos. Right. And now I would feel that there's just too much at risk for someone to, push the big red button. Right. So, whether it be like nuclear deterrence or economic deterrence, because, if China hurts America, economically, they're also going to hurt themselves.
Right.
With their whole trade war thing. And while I'm not an expert on it, I know that like everything's so closely interlinked that while you may want to be better than someone else, if you hurt that someone else, you're also hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And so we've sort of hit this point where no one's going to overtly, hopefully, screw over everyone else.
It is odd to me. Like once in a while, I think like, why? Like it seems like the world could be in a super good place, right? Like the climate change thing could get fixed. Like it doesn't seem impossible to fix it. You could make a lot of money selling solar panels or self-driving cars or something. It's not like the oil people, just like the cigarette people. Okay, we'll do marijuana now. Like you could win in that way. You could do trade with China and like, make like, it seems like a lot of people could make a lot of money and do some good
by just not trying to hurt everyone out.
Yeah, like or just dial it back a little bit, right? Go, you know what? We're going to sell gasoline for a long time.
Yeah,
especially in France, apparently. But maybe not with the coal. For maybe we'll pull that one back a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the global warming take, I think the only reason, I think everyone in the world is pretty much settled on global warming except for the U.S. In a huge part, like. I'm pretty sure America is the only one dropping out of COP21 from Paris.
Yeah. And I don't even know what, like, actually, this is one of the things with Donald Trump being president where I'm like, on the one hand, it's so ridiculous that people don't believe in global warming. On the other hand, as a practical matter, I'm not sure what it's actually doing, what impact it has, in the sense that, like, nothing's happening fast enough anyway. So even if we all believe in it, like we're not cutting carbon emissions, people aren't stopping eating meat. There's like people aren't doing a lot of stuff, and I wonder if shaking your finger at other people who don't believe in it, while you still eat meat and you still fly in airplanes, is kind of a way to sort of feel like you're doing something when you're kind of not really doing anything. I don't know.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think for like global warming, it's like a lot of people who don't want to acknowledge it, and a lot of people who do acknowledge it, they don't know how it works or what, in essence, like saying, oh. We are polluting the world. That makes the world hotter. Soon it's going to be just a sweatbox. It's not necessarily like that. Every hundreds of thousands of years, like the Earth gets further and closer to the sun based on rotation, based on like Milankovitch cycles. That's the name of it, I'm pretty sure. And so the temperature of the planet naturally varies 1 to 2 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
Over hundreds of thousands of years.
Right.
Our average planet temperature has gone up almost 1.5 degrees in 150 years.
Right.
And for you to say there's no causality there between human activity and the Industrial Revolution, like you can look at a graph of, CO2 emissions or like parts per million concentrations or whatever you want to look at in concentration versus time, and it'll be basically stagnant because remember, this is over hundreds of thousands of years naturally with ice ages and so on and so forth. It'll be very, very stagnant. I'm doing a little display with my hand, so it's very flat hand. And then in 1850, it will just skyrocket. Absolutely skyrocket. And if you look at that graph, you can back up and look at the difference in, a huge, like 10 to the millions, difference. And you'd be like, oh, there's no huge difference here. It's very small.
Right.
But if you zoom in and you look at the, difference in the past 150 years, it's huge. So,
and what's odd too is the people who don't believe in climate change, like it's not clear why. Like it's not really necessarily even in their interest, right? Like if you're, unless you're just an oil company, but the number of people who are executives at oil companies is very, very small.
Well, yeah, it's like, who they can control in the government is different, but
yeah, right. But I guess that's true. But at some point, you could just say, okay, climate change is a thing. That's a huge business opportunity. I'm going to be an evil dude making tons of money. I don't know, trading carbon credits or selling solar stuff or like you could make money doing that too. So it seems like a lot of people are just doing it to be kind of obnoxious.
Yeah,
like they're just like, I don't want to believe it because Barack Obama said it.
Well, it's just people are lazy too. It's like someone who works in the oil industry will be like, oh, I'm at risk of losing my job. Yeah. Okay, say the oil industry completely shut down right now, which couldn't happen because we have cars, and most cars run on gas.
And planes.
So if anything, it would be at a reduced rate because it'd have to have a fall off.
Yeah.
Well, now that you no longer have cars that can run on gas, what do you need? Cars that can run on electricity.
Yeah.
Who's going to build those cars?
And who's going to figure out how electricity is going to be generated if you don't have coal?
Exactly,
Like,
yeah. And who's going to build all that? Like, you need, wherever there's a lack of industry, like, you can build another. I mean, I don't know. It's so petty for us to get caught up in these.
It is very odd.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the auto industry. There was a time when they were they got regulated, and it worked for everybody because the government said, "Oh, you have to make cars safer." Okay, so now everyone's safer, but they're like, "Well, now, but everybody's got to buy a new car because you got to have the new safer car." So they're like, they were kind of benefiting. It just seems like climate change would benefit a lot of big evil companies, who are in it not for the climate change, but in it for the money, but could still do things that would change, cool the place off.
And I think the change will happen. Like, I think when cars were coming about, like in 1910 or whatever, and they were getting more and more popular, people riding horse or doing carriage things. Wow, carriage things. People riding around in carriages were like, wow, what a niche thing. That'll never be real over long distances. And like, would you say the cars are a niche thing now? Or most people riding horseback? So, I mean, give it 50 years, I'm sure there'll be a difference. But in 50 years, I mean, not that it will be too late, but it very well could be. I mean, no one can.
And then there's the science side of it. I mean, there's guys, I forget which of the Microsoft founders was like this. Not Bill Gates. One of the other ones was like, okay, climate change, we need to reduce our emissions by 20% a year, starting immediately for it to make a difference. However, the best we've ever done is like increased by 2% or something like that. So his point is like, he doesn't trust, he's like, great, if humans can cut their emissions, fine, but we need to come up with a scientific solution. I don't know, throwing stuff in the ocean or
insert geostorm here.
Something like that. And he's like, I do not prefer that. I do not think it's a good idea, but I also am, in his words, being realistic about whether humans will get their act together.
Well, yeah, because like in society, like we're sort of trained to fend for yourself.
Yeah.
And like with all the meritocracy thing I was talking about earlier, like everyone wants to look out for themselves, like if you think the economy, something bad's going to happen to the economy, you're going to make sure your money is okay. Yes. Even though if you pull out your money, you're contributing to the general problem of people like not investing in the stock market and so on and so forth. I think that's how economics work. But
that's pretty good. Yeah. Good summary.
So everyone will want to look out for themselves. And if everyone wants to look out for themselves, they'll think, oh, if everyone else is cutting back, what difference is it going to make if I don't cut back?
Yeah.
And then everyone has that point of view and then no one cuts back. And it's hard to get there's like, what is it? The populist mentality where like the whole group will sort of just go in sort of a flow and not change, even if it's more beneficial for them to change.
Yeah. I mean, I think the ones probably, your average liberal in San Francisco, they like recycle. And that doesn't really have too much to do with global warming. I mean, you put stuff in landfills, like that is a problem, but that's not really. But they eat meat, and that's probably a bigger problem. And then they're not going to cancel their trip to Thailand. So they have this kind of complicated, like, well, I'm not canceling my airplane trip. Yeah. But I care.
Well, it's like, I mean, hypocrites exist left and right. I mean, you could say, oh, I compost, I put 6 banana peels back into the earth this week. Yeah. And then if you take an international flight to, London, airplane pollution is like pretty significant. Right. Also, I mean, I'm on the edge. I'm saying something about myself here because like I'm in the grilling society and like meat production is also very taxing on the environment. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword where like, I care about the environment, but I'm also not going to stop eating meat.
Also living in houses, like as opposed to, I mean, the most environmentally conscious people are probably like people living in New York with no kids who don't eat meat and don't travel. And they're just stacked up in a city and not, on the earth, probably.
One of those micro apartments, 600 square feet.
Exactly. Like whether they care about the environment or not, they're probably doing the most for it. So.
Well, I think the best way to the easiest way to fix the environment is to just clean up the planet. I mean, you don't have to kill an industry immediately, but you have to acknowledge that there's a problem, make a difference. And that's the same thing with any issue like racism, global warming. To make a difference, first, everyone needs to be aware of the problem, and then you can work on a solution. So,
well, and that's been a really weird thing. Like, not to go too far on climate change, but when Al Gore came along, the one thing that happened is they rebranded it. So that if you're a skeptic, they went from it was global warming, now it's climate change. Yeah, because the problem was people were like, well, it's cold out. So,
well, yeah, when people say like, if climate change is a thing, then why is there still winter? And I'm like, you didn't go to.
And you get the opposite one, Ted Turner, who who founded CNN. I saw an interview with him on CNN, I guess, and he was in Atlanta, and he was like, "How can you not believe in climate change? You been outside today? It's hotter than hell." So,
I mean,
like the other side of
it's like
the coin. But
you've heard the argument just as much as you're trying to help. Because the thing is, people, and I myself included, like people will talk about stuff when they know nothing about it. I'm a college sophomore. How much could I possibly know about the economy when I haven't taken a single class in economics?
Yeah.
All I can do is be like, if you take your money out, that means there's no money in, so it must be bad.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's a lot more complicated than that sometimes. And people are like,
and climate change is a tough one that way because you can just walk outside and go, it's a beautiful day. And then like what's going to happen is it's real, but it's like more than just a bullet point. It's like, well, see, this happens and the ice sheet melts and then that. Like then
the albedo effect and all that.
Yeah, then the Earth is like less white because in the dark and absorbs more. And people are like, "Oh, this sounds like science," and I'm like, I'm out. But generally, like, if a bunch of people are saying something, you kind of trust them on, like, okay, I believe you. Like,
well, yeah, it's like if 99 bankers out of 100 told you to not invest in something,
you'd be like,
would
okay.
you invest in it?
Yeah.
It's like if 99 scientists tell you global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it is a thing, you're not going to believe them?
Yeah.
Or you're not even going to look at their evidence and blindly side with that one.
Well, and I think, like I said, my point is it kind of came back as a conservative issue somehow, but not for any reason I can figure out. Because if you're rich and conservative, like, why wouldn't you want a nice planet and also be rich? Like, it seems like it'd be a better thing.
It's not going to be poor if you...
It's almost just like a point of argument because it feels like everyone kind of agreed on it at one point.
Yeah.
And then we kind of went back to it's just like vaccine. Like there were no anti-vaxxers like 15 years ago. People were like, "Yay, vaccines work." And then,
well, anti-vaxxers, it's not only stupid not to vaccinate your children because you put them at risk.
It's nuts.
But by putting them at risk, you put society at risk because if they get a disease,
they can
then you're kind of screwing over everyone else, which is not. It's really inconsiderate.
Yes, at a minimum.
At a minimum, it's borderline dangerous.
So,
but
what
I digress.
of these types of issues do most people in your college are they around one, or are they mostly like, oh yeah, we're mostly focused on climate change, or are these all over the spectrum on what they're worried about?
Well, I mean, it's all over. It depends. Like a big thing has been popping up lately on college campuses in general is sexual assault awareness.
Yeah.
So I think there's this new Instagram page called GU Survivors, which are Georgetown University Survivors, and that's rose up in the past months to become much, much bigger and a big topic in conversation. There was a scandal recently. I mean, I won't go into details, where someone in the university was accused of a student in the university, and the student government was accused of assaulting persons or people. I'm not sure, but it's just sort of. There's been a lot of talk about it, and sort of Georgetown doesn't precisely follow what, DC and the federal government's discussing. Obviously it loosely, because there's Georgetown University College Democrats, Georgetown University College Republicans, and they'll, come advocate for this senator and call on the phone banks and come talk about this issue. I mean, I'm in the Georgetown Bipartisan Coalition.
Right. Oh, interesting.
The topic of conversation varies, but I think every college has their own microculture.
Yeah.
And then there's also just a general shift in sexual assault awareness. Yeah. At least at our school.
It's been around. I went to school, a long time ago, and it was still in the 80s was a thing. There was take back. The university wasn't doing it. It was students and the university. I shouldn't say Northwestern. It was take back the night stuff. So it was probably not as advanced as it is today, but it was on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It was a known problem.
So, I mean, I think that, the culture varies on terms of politics.
Yeah.
Georgetown obviously is very politic heavy because it's in DC, and everyone that goes there, I think
that's what they're doing.
A third of the people in the college are government majors.
Yeah.
Everyone's a government major. That's the stereotype. You're from New Jersey, you're a government major. But in the Bipartisan Coalition, we've had good talks. I'm the marketing director, so this past semester we've not only do we take trips out, we had a trip to the Pentagon, had a trip to the Capitol and the Supreme Court, which is good opportunity for people to get exposure and learn about the federal government and it's how it works. but also just some good talks. Like we had a sexual assault debate. I'm pretty sure we also had a debate on gun rights, and so on and so forth.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
All right, well, this is cool. This is more optimistic than I thought.
yeah, I mean,
To
it's
be
not
honest.
like students are just
Giving up.
yeah blacking out and not doing anything productive. Like I think the college culture today in general is very stressful because there's like a huge pressure to do, like accomplish great things in your 4 years there, like get so and so internships so you can get so and so jobs straight out the gate and get so and so grades if you want to go to med school. And people are like, people in my major, I'm basically one of the only 2 out of 13. There's only 13 chemistry majors in my grade out of 1,500. But like they're all super stressed about going to med school. They're like, I cannot get a B plus or I cannot get a B. And
that seems a little ridiculous. But.
well, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's like, because they feel that for a reason, because like society puts that pressure on them to like accomplish, like if you got a B in writing, does that mean you're not qualified to be a doctor?
Right.
I mean, like doctors can't write anyway. So like you've seen your little,
exactly.
So I think there's like this huge stress right now where like people need to have this huge social life. People need to have this huge academic success and like professional success now.
Yeah.
And I think what takes the tail end of that is sleep. And then because of that, people are very mentally and emotionally unstable.
Yeah, you can sleep later.
Well, yeah, like sleep when you die is like the 2 Chainz joke, but I mean,
Exactly.
it's kind of out of control that there's like all these expectations and, you know, like personally, if it's Friday night, I do not do work. And most of Saturday, I do not do work because I just need to relax. Like I will sit on my couch Saturday morning at 10 a.m. and play Mario Kart religiously. And Sunday, I will usually be working all day.
See, some things never change. Mario Kart is still cool.
Yes, Mario Kart is still cool. I want the new Smash Brothers, but yeah, it's Mario Wii. You know, that will always live.
I love it.
Yeah, it's too fun.
Well, cool. This has been great.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Come talk.
All right. Carter Cohen has been my guest. You can look him up on LinkedIn.
Yes, I mean, my name's Carter Cohen. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. This has been Something About Your Podcast. Talk to you next time.